nobody's perfect.
All right, so welcome to Well, Nobody's Perfect, and we're super pumped because today we have our very first guest.
Yeah, first guest ever. We're into podcast number 5.
Holy shit.
And you're it.
Hey,
Yeah, so
pinch yourselves, boys. It's happening.
We did it.
So a big welcome to Canadian superhero, Mr. Jay Baruchel.
Thank you very much. I like that.
Yeah, no worries.
Did my mother email you that?
Yes, we've been in touch with
Good.
Mademoiselle Baruchel.
She gave us some options.
Good.
That's the one we went with.
I like it.
Yeah, great manner over email, by the way. Super kind woman.
Yeah, she kills it. Yeah.
So would love to start off this chat with just talking a little Man-Seeking Woman.
Cool.
Super dig the show, by the way. It's
Thank you.
like really, really funny.
Yeah.
Just wrapped your second season there on FX. How did you become involved in this show?
It's like the most unromantic Hollywood story ever. I got sent a script and for the pilot, and I inhaled it, and it was like one of the rare scripts or anything to make me laugh out loud a bunch of times. But at the time, circumstances dictated I had a previous obligation that prevented me from being able to. So I had to, like, with a heavy heart, full on pass on it. And months went by, and my other thing kind of fell apart, mercifully, and they hadn't found their guy yet. And so it kind of came back to me, and in a bit of kismet, it was just kind of meant to be. And so then we made the pilot. Yeah.
Nice. The show has a lot of like great SNL tie-ins too, which is amazing. Did you know Simon Rich beforehand?
I knew a bit of like who he was, but I'd never met him. And then I read his book, one of his books, the one that our show's based on, Last Girlfriend on Earth, and I read that in like less than a day because it's just like the easiest, funniest thing to read. And and then I met him, and really obviously dug his energy. Anyone that spends time with Simon, like, it's clear that he's operating on a whole nother level. Like, the word genius is bandied about quite a lot. It actually applies to him, and he just is like, he just knows exactly what works and what's funny, and he's got the most important thing, which is just a very specific voice. Like you know it's his shit when you're watching it, which you can't say about a lot of people.
Definitely. When I was watching the show, I couldn't think of any comps.
No.
Usually you can do that pretty easily.
No, that was so cool. It was also, we had a hell of a time kind of marketing the show in that respect, because like it beggars no comparison whatsoever. Everything is, it's like this meets that, or if you like this, you'll like that. And there was just not a single TV show that we could do that with, because like, the conceit of it, people were like, wait, so they're dream sequences? I said, no, they're not dream sequences. Like the best I could come up with to describe it was like, it's like a live action cartoon kind of.
Yeah.
That's about
totally.
That's about like the only thing, because it's, or if you want to get, sort of asshole-ish and a bit meta about it, you say it's like a sitcom and a sketch show together, kind of, I guess. But I like cartoon come to life. But either way, like, it's like the first time in my career that I can say I'm doing something unlike anything else. And like, because everything is like something, and except on this show, you never know who's going to walk through the door. You never know where the next scene is going to take place, and there's no television show like ours. So that's a pretty huge one.
It trades nicely on like high concept ridiculousness, which I really appreciate.
Big time. Yeah.
And like, there was that one scene where you legislate nice dudes have to date
girls have to date guys that are nice to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And you end up in what seems like a fairly committed relationship with a homeless man named
guy. Chainsaw, Kevin McDonald.
Seemed like really nice. So one of the things that I appreciate about your performance in it is that you, like, it's nicely grounded despite all the crazy shit that's happening around it.
Thanks.
So I'm wondering how you prepare for that sort of thing, and how you actually inject real feelings into it, because it is so high concept.
Well, it's like one of the very first things that Simon and I talked about was that, like, this show doesn't work if the audience doesn't see themselves in it. And so then the fun trick is, how do you make the audience see themselves in something as fucking crazy as our show? Well, all of our craziness is born out of a real thing, right? Mm-hmm. So every weird, crazy thing that happens on our show has at its nucleus some awkward bit of degradation from being single. Mm-hmm. And so my way in was just to kind of connect with that. So for like the set piece in question, having a chip on my shoulder because I thought, and after all that nice stuff I did, and nice as means to an end, basically, right? And then I pay the price for that shit at the end of it. But like, there's always something to relate to, like the penis monster Tanaka, who like I get 2 liters of monster semen that I ingest. It's very easy to be fucking jealous. Like that's what I'm saying, and I think that's why the show works. Is that like, if it was all crazy all the time, you'd get bored. Right. If it was all sort of mumblecore minutia all the time, you might get bored. Mm. The two things inform each other and sell one another, and I think that so I think that as crazy as it gets, people always see themselves in those moments and know exactly what we're referencing.
Definitely, like the pilot. I think is a good example of how you really get into the show and kind of create this world for the audience, and with the going on a date with a troll. And I think that like there's also this element of like worst case scenario and what goes in your head before a blind date.
Yeah. Is she's going to be eating garbage and biting you and stuff.
Totally. Yeah. Is that her across the street? Yeah. Oh my God, that is her. Have you had like, it's hard to draw from experiences like that, obviously, but have you had like worst date situations?
Oh God,
like,
no. There's something to compare it to in my personal life for like pretty much all of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. And if you liked a girl or you liked someone and they dumped you, the first person they start dating is going to be Hitler to you, 100%, right? Totally. And of course everyone's going to love him and think he's the life of the party, and so like,
just a hilarious Hitler.
That's exactly it. Just like a guy, everyone fucking loves this guy, and so yeah, it's. Look, it's a shit show to be single, and period, at any time, in any era, and even more so now. And so I think that our weird show has this great. That's the thing. For as high concept and big as we go, we also spend a lot of time articulating very small, nuanced ideas, right? Like, what that sort of legislating the nice guy law thing, like, that's all born out of a very real, kind of hard to articulate thing. And so like we did this amazing job of being very subtle with what we're saying. What we're saying is subtle. The way we're saying it is massive.
Certainly. In the finale, you and Eric Andre have that giant robot fight.
Yeah.
Where you end up articulating some very serious issues in your relationship. But the thing that I appreciated about that was that it was a very well drawn conversation between two guys that are obviously very close.
That's it. Yeah.
Like I've had that conversation.
That's
before.
it. Like, dirty laundry that needed airing, right? That when you're friends, you'll often keep that shit to yourself, and then you have a point, when you get to a breaking point, when you're at loggerheads, if the friendship is of any import to you, well, then it's time to sort it out. If it isn't, then you'll just peace out and you guys will stop being friends. Mm-hmm. And so, I've had that conversation. I think a lot of people have.
Yeah. What is it like shooting at Toronto?
The best.
Yeah.
It's the greatest, man. Like I absolutely adore working here. As a Montrealer, I was bred to hate it here, and but I'd only ever spent 5 days at a time here for the festival or something.
Right.
It was when I was doing a movie, RoboCop, that I was here for 2.5, 3 months, and I got to actually live here kind of, and that was the start of my love affair. And then doing the first season here cemented it to the point of after the first season I bought a house here, nice. And so it's a town I adore living in, and it's awesome. It's quite a novelty for me to get to work in a place I live. I've never really haven't had that in my adult life. My work has always taken me elsewhere, and so if I'm going to work, it means I'm packing a suitcase. And so this is kind of cool that I just get to sleep in my bed and show up. And now that we're 2 seasons on, there's a bit of a we have a shorthand, and we have a vibe, and we have a posse, and it's the same people that come back. And so, like, again, I hate to use words that everyone throws around like family, but there's definitely that aspect to it. And so yeah, I if we're up to me, every gig would be around here.
Nice. And sort of
Canada, at least.
So to that point, you are obviously a fairly nationalistic Canadian.
Or and patriotic, at
least.
Yeah,
patriotic is actually definitely a better word, because nationalism has some connotations.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about being a Canadian artist and making and the import of making sort of Canadian work?
Yeah, I think it's like, and also there's an important caveat of Anglo-Canadian, because, like, you know, that old cliche of, like, we could learn a lot from Planet Quebec for how they create and consume their art. And, you know, if a Quebecois movie with, you know, Patrick Huard opens on a Friday the same time as a big American thing with Brad Pitt, the Huard movie wins and goes #1 that weekend. And that's, like, you know, Goon is one of the only English-Canadian movies in my life that I have any recollection of opening at #1 across Canada, and we did, and that's a huge fucking thing. But, like, I can't name any others.
Yeah,
you know.
Why do you think that is?
A bunch of reasons. I think that we have to force broadcasters and theater owners' hands a bit more. You know, I remember being 15. The film festival that I've gone to as a fan, where I bought tickets and stuff, was Fantasia.
Okay.
And I've been going to Fantasia since I was 14. And I remember seeing a movie, a South Korean film called Joint Security Area, when I was like 15 or 16. And the director came and did a Q&A with an interpreter, and I was sat in the front row, and he had a buzz cut, and he talked about that he and a bunch of other directors in Korea were shaving their heads as part of this protest to up the quota of Korean films shown in cineplexes. Well, that quota, they protest, they won, they got it, they forced it, and that director went on to direct Old Boy and the entire Vengeance trilogy, and tell me that Korean cinema hasn't given a lot of great stuff to the world in the last decade. Definitely. Well, this is the exact generational effect of forcing theater owners to play their fucking movies.
Right.
Okay, and so in our country, it's a weird one, because, like, I firmly believe that, you know, in competition, and people should pay money for the stuff they want to see. So but I also think that we're at a disadvantage, given that broadcaster and theater owner, if you see in dollar signs, it makes much more sense to give 6, you know, screens to the Avengers than it does to give one film to screen to a Canadian film. So what we have to do is split the difference. I think you force their hand for a time. And then eventually we will reach a degree of maturation, and there will be, like, sort of an institution of it where you'll no longer have to be qualified. You know, we have to get to a point, as my buddy Jacob Tierney always says, like, you're not watching Canadian cinema as homework.
Right.
You know, it shouldn't always be a civic duty to watch a Canadian flick, right? And not that it isn't for me, but what I mean is, ideally, I want people to come and see Goon 2. Yeah, if it's a degree of patriotism in there, 100%, that's great. But I want them to go see it because it seems like a cool flick. You know, I don't want them to think that they're doing Canada any favors. So what we have to do is get to a point where we make enough movies and enough different types of movies that's the case, right? And I think that's the other the other sort of issue or phenomenon, is that in this country, for a long time, in English Canada, for the most part, we've been content to make movies just for film students. And I'm not saying stop making those. Like, it's a wonderful thing to live in a country where taxpayer money goes to a movie about a girl fucking corpses. Like, that's awesome. But when you're, like, thinking about the resources you have, let's give the bigger chunk to something that might put butts in the seats, and the average guy in Calgary might want to go see and take his wife to, right? Like, because Dougie in Calgary is not going to Kist. Like, that's just the case. That's just the God's honest truth. But Dougie in Calgary is going to the Cineplex every fucking weekend. So what we have to do is make movies for Dougie in Calgary a bit.
Yeah. What do you think? How does comedy play into that in terms of the genre? I think that we have such a rich history of comedy in Canada with SCTV, and you're seeing that in television with like alumni going to Schitt's Creek and from the Screen Awards the other night, that obviously was evident. But yeah, where does comedy play in that? Because that's such a genre that can reach that audience.
And we kill at it, and we've always punched above our weight. And like, you know, I was saying last night, there's never been a time in American movies where we weren't at the forefront of it, from Mary Pickford onwards, literally. Like, so I often say that we're like Greeks amongst Romans in a way. You know, there's a lot of Canadian teachers, a lot of Canadian artists working their craft down there. So I think what we have the chance to do also, like, comedy requires a few less resources than a fucking action movie does, right? And so I think that's a great chance. Like, and Trailer Park Boys is proof positive of something that was locally made, locally produced, locally consumed, and got huge, and you know, and eventually exported as a result. That's the thing, is that like, it was like the first time that in my life I can remember Canadians getting famous in Canada first and then going to the States. Like, it was usually like they did something here and then they pieced out, got famous, and then we claimed them. And then the only time we'd see them on TV here is when shit dried up for them down in the States. Now, the Trailer Park Boys just went out there and did it. And they did it in their town with no apologies, and it got huge. And now they sell out. They do live shows that sell out everywhere they go in the States. It's massive in Ireland. It's massive in Australia. It's massive in the UK. And so, like, clearly we can make shit that we dig, and I'm very hopeful for the future. I think shit like Letterkenny and Schitt's Creek, I think that like there's a lot of cool stuff coming, and I think that there's finally the appetite up here to kind of like, we can compete, man. We can compete, and we can do stuff that they can't do, right? So this is when I was like convincing people to work on Goon 2. My big pitch was like, we don't see our competition as another independent comedy. We or any other Canadian film. We see our competition as the Avengers. 100%. We're going there to take their fucking heads off, but what we have at our advantage that they don't, okay? They're $300 million investments. So they're bloated corporate endeavors that have to answer to a bunch of masters. Therefore, there's a ceiling on how interesting they can be. Well, what we can do, having a much less resources and being up here on planet Canada, is we can go harder than they can go.
You can be nimble. We
can be, and come with balls, right? Like, I remember at the first American screening, first LA screening we did of Goon down there, it was a room of execs, agents, and people who work at studios and shit down there, and their fucking heads were taken off. They were like floored because they were like, oh my God, they didn't get the message that people don't swear in movies anymore. They didn't get the message that you're not allowed to show blood in movies anymore, and they didn't get the message that blah, blah, blah. And so it's like this, I'm not, you know, it's like the guy that, it's like the record producer that hears the Nirvana demo tape, right? You know, rock and roll, the landscape of rock and roll at that point is fucking Poison, right? And the band and actual Poison, and how much, and look at these awful records and how expensive they fucking were to make, and how expensive it was to make those goddamn videos. Then these three kids from Seattle make this demo tape that has more truth and balls and teeth to it than anything Poison has ever done. That's what we have the chance to do up here, right? People shouldn't forget the CBC gave the world Kids in the Hall. We have the, you know, my American friends are envious that I live in a country where where the government gives money to shit. You know, I gotta tell, every movie, every TV show, every record, that's part of, we own part of that. You know, it's the only country in the world where like Ottawa will give money to, you know, anti-Ottawa separatist theater in Quebec, and that's like a fucking amazing thing, and so we should be proud of that and know that we have the chance to go harder and to come ballsier and more truthful than they do because of the, you know, we should use our less resources to our advantage.
Totally agree.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
No, that's great.
No, I'm like ready to run out and make a movie right now.
Can we go make some stuff?
Yeah,
just going right.
And that's something you talked about in the end conversation the other day, was like to do it.
Yeah.
Like that advice that you gave for aspiring filmmakers.
Just find a way, man. Like, you know, Jason Eisner, who's you know, pretty talented filmmaker in his own right, I'm lucky enough to have him editing Goon 2. you know, he told me about, like, before he had made Hobo, he would just find ways to be on set, right? So they made this movie with Jim Caviezel called Outlander. It's sci-fi Beowulf kind of thing, when Vikings.
Very strange film.
Very strange film that they did out in Halifax. Jason just wandered onto set one day.
Like a vagrant?
Yeah.
Like just sort of like, hey, what's up,
Yeah,
guys?
he would just put his hoodie on and went and stood by the monitor. And no one told him to leave. And he ended up being there 8 hours, to the point where, like, Caviezel came up to him and was like, I just got to take a piss. Can you just make sure no one's watching? He's like, yeah, you got it. And he was like, and so he started working on this movie, and no one knew who he was. And then he paid it in kind when he was making Hobo. 2 kids came to watch him. He's like, and they're like, he's like, you looking for something to do? And like, yeah. He's like, so come work on the movie. And so, and this is not me giving advice, telling people, like, trespass and sneak into places.
Crash that set.
Yeah. But do what you got to do. And if you can, like, and it's just like, it takes less. It is now easier. The tools are now easier and cheaper to make any movie. You know, any kid can make any record now, and any kid can make a movie now. How good they will be, that's a whole nother thing. But you have the ability to. So there's just no reason, you know, if you want to write movies or you want to direct movies, like I said, ideas are fucking worthless. Yeah. Everyone's got an idea, and but an idea is nothing. You know, like you just go out there and find a way to do it. You know, and don't be content with anything else.
So on the topic of going out there and doing it, you're directing Goon 2.
Yeah.
Was it always the plan to create a sequel to Goon, or was that a thing that kind of happened out of the success of the first film?
No, neither actually. So we had never set out for it to be a franchise, but also we didn't see that kids bought a bunch of tickets. We're like, okay, let's do this again. We had decided while we were shooting the first one. Okay. It was that, and for what I think are fairly pure reasons, which is we just started scratching the surface. The boys all just kind of started finding their sea legs and their rhythm, and we were just like, it's not to say they weren't awesome the whole time. They were. But what I mean is, movies have this awful thing of just when you finally get yourself going and then it's over. Mm-hmm. And so we saw that we had this great, what we thought was a pretty deep world with a bunch of very colorful, lovely characters, with stories left to tell. And also there was something of a moral imperative to tell, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. We felt that, like, we could put a bit more medicine in this one, you know. I don't know how much of a place there would have been for a conversation about terrible physical and mental repercussions in the first one, because it wasn't about that. It was a guy finding it. It's about the start of his love affair. Well, this one is about living in it, and so that now's the time. So it's just like we owed ourselves, and we owed the fans, and we owed hockey the rest of the conversation, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that your point about, like, well, the film in general, the role of the enforcer is kind of hit a point this year with the All-Star Game with John Scott.
Yeah, no kidding.
What are your thoughts on that? The NHL or Bettman suggesting that he shouldn't play. I feel like that's
it was pretty ugly.
Yeah, very ugly.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. You know, it was this great, like, you can't have it both ways, Bettman. It was this, like, this sort of Bettman NHL that they've been selling that doesn't actually exist. You know, that's you know, that Phoenix Coyotes do business, that it is you know, a safe, middle of the road Tim Hortons commercial family entertainment kind of thing. You know, like, I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to do what Dana White did for the UFC. I'm not trying to compare NHL to old school UFC in terms of blood sport, but what I mean is he's just trying to make it as palatable and middle of the road as he can possibly do it. And so part of that is fan involvement and trying to get people to be invested. And so, well, motherfucker, this is what it looks like when you get people invested.
Right.
You know, England's dealing with this right now with Bodie McBoatface.
I love Bodie McBoatface.
This research vessel that they made the mistake of letting the public name. Well, what do you think was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So
the finest named boat to ever grace the seven seas.
Kidding. So he says, so new NHL fans are involved. Fans want this guy.
Yeah.
So then that's the guy.
Yeah.
Now, and I think it's ugly that my team was involved in like training for him and trying to bury him in the minors and like so that he wouldn't get his chance, you know. And I thought that was embarrassing. And so I was like very happy that he finally got out there. But I don't know that it's worth making a movie about. Number one.
Right.
Number two. The part of the narrative that everyone has forgotten is how John Scott was one of the NHL's great heels before this. This was not anyone's watched hockey for the last decade. This is not anybody's favorite man. It's the guy that this is a 6'7" man that picked a fight with Phil Kessel in a preseason game.
Totally.
Okay, so yeah, he's the underdog and the victim in this story. But this is brand new. This is the first in the scope of his career. Yeah. So it's all fucked, is what I'm saying.
I blame him for the whole David Clarkson debacle. Toronto gets David Clarkson.
No,
his first game, he goes out there to protect Kessel, and then he gets suspended, and he doesn't really even get a start in the season. It was over for him.
That's John Scott for you.
Although he did a really good job of repping himself in that Players Tribune piece. That
big time.
Man alive.
Big time.
He turned himself into an incredibly sympathetic character.
Big time.
Just a
and
man with kids.
That's exactly right. And which is not mutually exclusive. Like, he was a villain on the ice, but and I read that article and I full on believe if the kids wanted him there, and that's who they said. If the NHL says kids, tell us who's going to be there, and the kids say this is the guy, then that's the guy.
Yeah.
Period.
Nice. So on that enforcer tip, we have created a little thing, an enforcer bracket.
Oh yeah.
This is what we got going here.
So to explain this to the individuals listening at home, we've created a bracket that will be up in the show notes.
That's awesome.
That has great enforcers from cinema history.
Yeah.
So on this enforcer bracket, we've created it's like the Elite Eight, so we're referring to it as the Hateful Eight. Our number 1 seed is Fezzik.
Yeah.
From the Princess Bride.
He's gonna be hard to beat.
Yeah. No shit, man.
But even though Carigulas took him down pretty easily, he's a favorite of mine.
He will be facing off against Jules, Samuel
From Pulp
Jackson.
Fiction. Yeah. And then Jaws versus Jaws.
Yeah,
That's an obvious one.
Rob and I were debating over if Jaws the shark is actually an enforcer, but I think you had a good...
My view is that Jaws the shark is the enforcer of the sea.
Yeah. Arguably.
I was going to fuck with that guy.
No, definitely not. Chewbacca versus fucking nutcase from No Country.
Exactly, Anton Chigurh.
Yeah. I actually don't know who's going to win that one.
Yeah, right. That's a good question.
But we left the 4 and 5 seed for you.
Oh my gosh.
As wild cards. So who are you liking as your wild cards in here?
Let's put in Frank Nitti from the Untouchables.
Oh, nice.
That's Capone's enforcer.
Awesome.
Who gets pitched off the fucking rooftop.
The white suit, right?
Billy Drago.
Exactly.
Your friend, he screamed like a pig.
That's
Frank
a great
Nitti's a good one. And then I already got one Star Wars, so I mean Boba Fett is like the one, but I would say, you know what? Since nobody realizes this because he's the more famous one, but Danny Glover's character Murtaugh's the lead in Lethal Weapon. Riggs, right? I'll say Riggs.
All right, I like it.
Riggs takes Nitti any day of the week, by the way.
Do we want to go through quickly and see who we think will...
let's do it.
All right, so we got Fezzik versus Jules.
I got to go Andre the Giant, man.
Yeah, nice.
So
All
right. Fezzik takes it.
Yeah.
For it.
Jaws versus Jaws.
Well, Jaws is in 2 Bonds. Jaws is in 5 Jaws, so I'd say Jaws.
No.
Shark Jaws.
Shark Jaws. Enforcer of the sea. That makes me so happy.
Shark Jaws, okay.
And Chewbacca versus Anton Chigurh.
It's got to be Chewbacca.
It has to be, right? Even though he's more of a co-pilot than an enforcer, I still think it's
a big motherfucker, and he's got that.
Totally.
He's got the honking gun belt.
You do not want to play space chess with him.
No, God, no. Chewie?
I feel like he'd just rip his arms off. Okay, so then we have Chewie versus, and you said Riggs beats.
Yeah, it's got to be Riggs.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we got Chewie
versus Martin Riggs. All right.
I like this battle.
I like it.
So Chewie versus Riggs.
And Under the Giant versus Jaws.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This is a hard one.
I feel like you got to go Andre still.
Yeah.
I think the 1 seed continues on that side.
All right, Fezzik.
there's definitely a world where he like somehow drowns that shark.
Or just starts eating it.
Slowly but surely.
And
I guess if it's in a ring versus in the ocean is a factor, but this is your wild card. This is the wild card. Continue.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. Riggs is suicidal, so he's always willing to lose more than Chewbacca, so it's got to be Martin Riggs.
I like it.
So we have a final, which is Martin Riggs versus Fezzik.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, awesome. I like this battle.
Yeah. So how do we decide who wins this?
I think we take it to Twitter.
I think we gotta let kids decide.
We're gonna let the kids decide.
All right.
So we'll put this out on Twitter. Fezzik versus Riggs. Tell us who wins this battle of the ages.
Yeah, that's right.
And Jacob,
and then feel free to shoot a movie based on it.
Only if you join us.
Only if you join us.
Yeah, Canadian content that needs to be seen.
That's exactly right.
Stories that must be told.
That's it.
Man, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, lads. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.